This is part 2 to the Ashokan farewell tutorial. In the first part we discussed the basic tune and I showed you a close-up of the left hand so you could learn it. And we talked about how to use scales to help you do Ashokan farewell better. Now in this video, part 2, we're going to talk about bow patterns and some left hand tricks you can do to really make it elegant and dress it up a little bit. Bow patterns in waltzes, I really don't think there is a bow pattern for a waltz. There's just guidelines that you adhere to. First of all, you want, like I said in part 1, you want to work on very legato stroke, milking and pulling the tone out of the string and using your smooth collet bow changes to get smooth bow changes. The other little guideline I would recommend is I try to put downbeats on a down bow, or especially the beginnings of a new phrase, like the B part. I always work it out so that I'm on a down bow on the down beat. And you don't have to do that. That's just kind of how I arrange my bowings so that I'll be on a nice strong down bow where it feels natural. But really, there's no rules for fiddle bowing. As soon as I say I do it one way, there's going to be 10 people say they do it the other way, and they'll sound fine doing it. So I'm just telling you the guidelines that I use for myself, okay? And the other little thought is don't memorize your bowings. Stay flexible enough that you can totally screw up a bowing and you'll be fine. You don't want to be rigid on one memorized bowing, okay? I want to talk about what you can do with your left hand ornaments next. As with hoedown and reels, you can do slides in waltzes. They're just handled a little bit differently, a little more elegantly. There's certain notes that you're going to find are tempting to slide on. There's a lot of notes you're going to be tempted to slide on. My advice to you is eliminate half of those notes. You don't want to slide all over the place or it starts to sound tacky. So pick your favorites and stick with those, or change it up every time you play it. But I wouldn't do more than one slide in a measure for sure. I'd barely do one slide in every other measure, actually. Use them sparingly. It's like salt or a spice. Too much of it and it ruins the dish. Instead of doing all slides, try throwing in some little turns. I call them turns because they're not quite an Irish cut where they buzz their finger. Basically, just, I'll show you. It's easier to show you than tell you. So instead of, I added a little turn. Okay, and turns or grace notes or whatever you want to call them work really nicely in scale passages because we're just going 3, 2, 1, A, 2. So 3, 2, 1 between the 3 and the 2. 3, 2, 1. The second finger is the middle note. And so the second finger gets the turn on its note. 3, 2, 1. That's a general rule of thumb. You just have to kind of noodle with it and work it out so that it flows and does not interrupt the melody. You don't want it to be a distraction from the natural melody or you'll ruin the waltz, okay? Let me show you a few more places where you could add these. Turns are a tune can tolerate more turns than it can slides. You can use them more often, especially if you do them quickly, because then they don't exhaust the listener's ear. So I just did one in every single measure. Okay, now I just did a slide. The reason I chose to do a slide there is because it was on a repeated pitch. And that's another good place to stick in a slide or some kind of ornament, is on repeated pitches, because repeated pitches can get boring and they can sound a little pedantic. So you could do, I wouldn't do that one. I like a tiny little slide there. Just experiment with it. Okay, those are the two main ornaments, left-hand ornaments I use in most waltzes, is a little bit of tasteful slides and some turns or grace notes or cuts. That's it for the left-hand ornaments, and that's enough for part 2. This video's long enough, so I'll go ahead and see you in part 3 where we'll wrap it up. I'll teach you some variations on this melody. We'll discuss how to play chords and backup on a waltz, and we'll talk about introductions for a waltz. Okay, I'll see you in part 3.